Have you ever wondered what happened behind the regal facade in the immediate aftermath of Princess Diana's untimely passing, and why her brother, Charles Spencer, emerged as one of the fiercest critics of the system that was supposed to protect her? In today's video, we examine the heart-wrenching sequence of events that transpired before and after Diana's funeral, the battles fought on behalf of her sons, and the controversial decisions that changed the royal family's image forever. On August 31st, 1997, the world awoke to a nightmare. Diana, Princess of Wales, had been tragically killed in a car crash in Paris. It wasn't just the British public that grieved. People from every corner of the globe felt the shock. Diana was much more than a royal figure. She was widely considered the people's princess, a symbol of compassion and empathy whose humanitarian work had touched countless lives. From her endeavors with AIDS awareness to her campaign against landmines, she captured hearts for her genuine, hands-on approach to helping others. Even the harshest tabloids couldn't dismiss the fact that she was a deeply caring individual who sought to modernize the image of the royal family. Yet, behind this revered public persona lay an intricate web of personal turmoil. Diana's marriage to Prince Charles had broken down irreparably, leaving her vulnerable to intense media scrutiny and royal traditions that often seemed to prioritize decorum over genuine well-being. For several years, the constant chase by paparazzi had plagued her every public appearance. She spoke candidly, in interviews and conversations with trusted confidants, about feeling isolated in a system resistant to change. Even after her divorce, she remained in the spotlight, more famous than ever, but also more exposed to tabloids that treated her life like a never-ending spectacle. Charles Spencer, Diana's younger brother, was in South Africa when he received two phone calls that would alter his life forever. The first told him that Diana had been in a serious accident. The second call confirmed her death. In that moment, a wave of anger and sorrow washed over him. He knew how relentlessly the press had harassed his sister, following her everywhere she went, pushing her to the limits of her emotional endurance. The idea that their aggressive pursuit might have contributed to her demise was almost too much to bear. Spencer wasn't simply grieving a globally beloved princess. He was mourning a sister he had grown up with. As children, they had shared laughs and private family moments away from prying eyes. He had witnessed firsthand the overwhelming pressures Diana faced once she entered royal life. From the initial fairy tale narrative that accompanied her engagement to Prince Charles, to the harsh reality of a failing marriage, played out on front pages across the world, Diana's story was as public as it was tragic. In the days following Diana's death, Britain entered an unprecedented period of collective mourning. The gates of Kensington Palace overflowed with flowers, messages, photos, and personal mementos. People who had never met Diana spoke of her as though she were a close friend, lauding her empathy and the genuine warmth she exuded in every handshake and conversation. There was an immense outpouring of sorrow, with many individuals standing vigil through cold nights just to be near a place that held her memory. Despite this overwhelming outpouring, one institution seemed conspicuously quiet: the royal family. At Balmoral Castle in Scotland, the Queen, Prince Charles, and Diana's sons, William and Harry, kept to themselves, away from London and the teeming crowds of mourners. Days passed with no official statements and no visible sign that the monarchy shared the public's heartbreak. This silence led to widespread anger. Newspapers questioned why the Union Jack at Buckingham Palace wasn't flying at half-mast. Loyal subjects began to doubt whether the monarchy understood the depth of the nation's grief. At the heart of the silence were two young boys struggling to understand that their mother would never come home. William, just 15, and Harry, 12, had been told by their father, Prince Charles, that Diana had died in a crash. They reportedly asked repeatedly if she was really gone, clinging to the desperate hope that the news was somehow a mistake. They were left in Balmoral's quiet halls, receiving minimal emotional support and little opportunity to mourn in a manner befitting two children who had just lost the most important person in their world. Charles Spencer, aware of their anguish, believed the last thing these boys needed was more public intrusion. He worried that media attention and certain royal protocols would only deepen their trauma. The thought of them being forced to participate in large, highly public ceremonies so soon after Diana's death struck him as cruel beyond measure. Nonetheless, he found himself in a complex tug-of-war with palace officials. As preparations for Diana's funeral took shape, Spencer learned of plans for William and Harry to walk behind their mother's coffin during the procession from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey. Instantly, he objected. How could anyone expect two grieving children to parade their sorrow before a watching world? In discussions with royal courtiers, He insisted Diana would never have wanted her sons thrust under such intense scrutiny at such a fragile moment. But palace insiders responded with a single refrain: "It has been decided." Spencer argued passionately, claiming this decision lacked both empathy and logic. He suggested alternatives, but his arguments fell on deaf ears. The monarchy, adhering to tradition, viewed the funeral as a state affair requiring a certain display of dignity. Charles Spencer, on the other hand, viewed it through the lens of a family tragedy, believing that what William and Harry needed above all was protection. Eventually, Spencer was told the boys had personally expressed a wish to walk behind the coffin. Believing this was true, he stepped back. He did not want to deny them a final act of closeness, if it was their decision. Only much later would William and Harry confess they never really had a choice. They had been informed, not asked, that they would walk, a directive that came from higher authorities within the royal machinery. The morning of September 6, 1997, dawned over London, shrouded in collective mourning. People from around the UK, as well as visitors from across the globe, crowded the capital streets. Many had camped out overnight, holding flowers and handwritten letters. The atmosphere was both reverent and tense. When the funeral cortege began its journey, a hush fell over the crowd that was occasionally broken by sobs or whispered prayers. Prince William, Prince Harry, Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and Charles Spencer walked in a somber line behind the coffin. The sight of Diana's two young sons, forced into the glare of the world's cameras just days after her death, became an enduring image of late 20th century history. Observers recall hearing nothing but muffled weeping as the coffin passed by, draped in the royal standard. Bouquets were tossed, tears streamed down faces, and many onlookers could not reconcile the heartbreak of these children with the formality of the event. Inside Westminster Abbey, global dignitaries, political leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens gathered to pay final respects. Solemn music drifted through the vast space, and rows of mourners sat in silent anticipation, aware that Charles Spencer would deliver the eulogy. Few could guess just how bold and unfiltered his words would be. Taking the podium, Spencer spoke with clear conviction. He described Diana as the most hunted person of the modern age, pointing directly to the press whose incessant need for photographs and headlines had dogged her for years. Yet, his critique went beyond the paparazzi. He lamented the blood family who had, in his view, failed to shield Diana from the powers that be. He underscored that Diana's true magic came not from her royal title, but from her boundless capacity for empathy. She was, he emphasized, a people's princess, because she understood the pain and joys of ordinary lives, someone who could connect with the homeless, the ill, and the forgotten without condescension. Then came the statement that would reverberate across the nation. Spencer promised that Diana's family, the Spencers, would do everything in their power to guide and protect William and Harry, sparing them from the harsh realities Diana had faced. It was a stunning moment, implicitly challenging the monarchy's authority in raising its future kings. In a royal funeral setting, applause is virtually unheard of, but at that instant, an emotional ovation erupted inside Westminster Abbey, a spontaneous outpouring of approval for the man who had finally voiced the anger many had felt but dared not speak. While Spencer's speech offered hope to those appalled by the monarchy's stoicism, the reality proved far more complex. William and Harry, both in direct line to the throne, were already inseparable from the very institution that Spencer critiqued. The monarchy and its protocols would shape their education, lifestyle, public duties, and eventually, their own marriages. Spencer found himself unable to intervene in any meaningful way that would detach them from the system. Although he could offer emotional support, his eulogy's promise was more symbolic than actionable. In interviews over the years, Spencer would reiterate his frustration, noting that Diana had come to him in times of deep distress, phoning him to cry about her sense of isolation. He believed the monarchy had opportunities to protect her, but never fully stepped in. His criticisms did not wane with time. Rather, they grew sharper as he witnessed his nephews navigate the same hostile media environment that had played a role in their mother's demise. Many argue that the tragedy of Diana's death, coupled with Spencer's public censure, forced the monarchy to confront its public image. The Queen, stung by the backlash over her delayed response, would later acknowledge the need to learn lessons from the crisis. Subsequent royal events included more displays of empathy and greater efforts to appear accessible. On the surface, it seemed as though Spencer's stand and Diana's legacy had initiated real change in an age-old institution. Yet insiders and critics alike suggest the reforms have been superficial overshadowed by deeply entrenched traditions that remain resistant to fundamental transformation. The monarchy continues to operate with a firm hand on protocol, and while public relations strategies have modernized, it is unclear whether the emotional well-being of royals, particularly younger members, has become a top priority behind palace walls. Diana's name still commands respect and adoration, but the systemic issues she battled may remain largely intact. Fast forward to 2020, Prince Harry and his wife, Meghan Markle, made the unprecedented decision to step back from royal duties. They left the UK, seeking a lifestyle away from the suffocating media scrutiny and the strict demands of monarchy. In interviews, Harry referenced the parallels between Meghan's experience and his mother's. He expressed fear that history would repeat itself and believed the institution was not doing enough to protect them from intrusive and damaging press narratives. For many observers, Harry's actions were the ultimate echo of Charles Spencer's funeral speech. Here was Diana's younger son, effectively exercising the very freedom that Spencer had long argued the princes deserved, a life free from relentless paparazzi and rigid expectations. While Spencer has not publicly declared a direct role in Harry's decision, one can draw a line from that funeral eulogy to Harry's choice. Both acts challenged the centuries-old norms of the House of Windsor, highlighting the tension between personal well-being and royal duty. Prince William has since continued within the royal fold, embracing his path as a future king. He honors Diana's memory through his charitable initiatives and public engagements that often mirror her focus on mental health and vulnerable populations. Prince Harry, in contrast, has chosen a road that distances him from the monarchy and the UK tabloids. Both princes, however, remain united in their admiration for their mother and her enduring legacy. Each in his own way has confronted the question that Charles Spencer raised decades ago. How can personal well-being coexist with an institution that sometimes views individuals as mere components of a grand tradition? Countless interviews, documentaries, and books have delved into how that moment behind Diana's coffin deeply impacted both William and Harry. Harry has described it as a memory seared into his mind, a moment he never wanted to relive or see repeated in any form. William, too, has hinted that while he did his duty, it was an incredibly challenging emotional ordeal. Charles Spencer's protest, had it succeeded, might have spared them that final heartbreak on such a public stage. Yet, the monarchy's gravitational pull proved too strong for a brother's plea. Public fascination with Diana shows no sign of diminishing. Her humanitarian spirit, fashion sense, and vulnerability remain a potent blend that continues to captivate new generations. Films, TV series, and a steady stream of media coverage keep her story alive. Charles Spencer's unwavering criticisms form a cornerstone of the Diana narrative. They serve as a reminder that behind every public figure stands a family, complete with personal bonds and private heartbreak. And for Diana, it was her younger brother who stepped forth, showing the world that love for her extended beyond the gilded confines of the palace walls. In the aftermath of the funeral, Charles Spencer made one more profound decision. He chose to bury Diana on an island at Althorpe, the Spencer family estate, rather than in a public royal vault. By laying her to rest away from the hustle of London, away from the prying eyes of paparazzi, he offered her a sanctuary she was denied in life. Today, visitors can pay their respects at Althorpe, though the exact resting place remains somewhat secluded, an attempt to ensure Diana has the privacy she so rarely experienced. In this final act, Spencer exerted control in the one area where tradition had no overriding rule, granting his sister some peace at last. Even all these years later, people still question whether Charles Spencer could have done more, or if he was already battling forces too large to overcome. Could he have fought more aggressively to keep William and Harry away from the funeral procession? Might he have influenced Diana's security arrangements, or offered her more support during her darkest hours? On the other hand, was he simply outmatched by an institution that has shaped British history for centuries? The truth may lie somewhere in between. He did what he could in an environment filled with rigid traditions and overshadowed by powerful monarchic authority. His eulogy was both defiance and devotion. He refused to stay silent, even if it meant angering the palace. By airing these issues publicly, he spurred global discourse on the very nature of royalty, privacy, and compassion. Diana's story endures as a complex tapestry of love, duty, heartbreak, and service. She elevated charitable causes to new heights, revolutionizing how royals connect with society's most vulnerable members. Yet, her personal struggles underscored the monarchy's reluctance to adapt, problems that still haunt it. Charles Spencer remains a primary voice reminding the world that beneath the pageantry, a very real tragedy unfolded, one that hinged on an institution's inability or unwillingness to safeguard someone it claimed as one of its own. Diana's death was a defining global event, and the funeral, complete with William and Harry's mournful procession, has become one of the most unforgettable images of the late 20th century. Charles Spencer's role in challenging the monarchy at such a pivotal moment showed that even centuries-old institutions can be forced to confront their shortcomings when public sentiment demands it. It stands as a testament to how one person's courage to speak plainly in the face of immense pressure can ripple across nations in decades. Yet, as we look back on this story, we must remember that real lives were and continue to be affected. From Diana's own mental health battles to Harry's eventual departure, the tension between monarchy and individual well-being remains an ongoing narrative. Did Charles Spencer's outspokenness make a permanent dent in those stone walls of tradition? Or was his protest swallowed up by the sheer inertia of an institution that resists radical reform? That question still sparks debate. Now, it's time for you to weigh in. Could Charles Spencer realistically have done more to protect William and Harry, or was he operating at the limits of what any individual could achieve within a centuries-old monarchy? Was his funeral speech a turning point that forced the royals to be more transparent, or simply a blip in a long history of closely guarded tradition? Share your perspectives in the comments below. We'd love to know what you think of Charles Spencer's actions, Diana's legacy, and the monarchy's response. If you found this deep dive insightful, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more in-depth explorations of royal history and the figures who shape it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious about the stories beneath the headlines and never stop asking the questions that bring truth to light.